Alright, I hope you guys can see me. I'm trying to do this video about, I wanted to kind of do an update on my treatment with bee venom therapy, but I also wanted to talk about kind of things that I think need to get addressed based on my recent experience with bee venom therapy. Anyway, I run the group, the Bee Venom Miracle for Lyme disease, and I do a lot of videos on YouTube, and I think my channel is called the Bee Venom Therapy channel on YouTube. And I do a lot of videos in which right now I don't have any bees with me, but in which I talk about the tiny apiary, which my husband Barry Savage makes. You're welcome to ask him anything. We have a page called the Tiny Apiary or Tiny Apiary, and we have an Etsy shop. I forget what that is called. It's like Mini Woodworks or something like that. But if you type in the Tiny Apiary, it will come up. And he also makes reverse tweezer stands, and so I'll be showing some. I'm going to be doing some demonstrations with those to give people an idea of why some people like to have tweezer stands. Anyway, the thing is recently I hit my 1-year mark. So I started stinging with live bees on June 8th, 2015. And the reason I bring up that I started stinging with live bees is because prior to that I had done injectables with Venex. I really don't count that because I didn't see a whole lot of changes with Venex. Whereas when I started stinging, within 2 weeks I noticed that my sweats, which were Babesia related I believe, and maybe Erklia related, stopped. And so while I've had, minor sweats here and there, I wouldn't consider that to be any different than most people. I don't think my Babesia is gone. And I say that because I still have labored breathing at times, especially during the summer. But what happened is that around the year mark, and so that was around like the beginning of June this year, and maybe even a little before that, I just started really struggling. And I put that in group. I think I talked about it, and immediately I got this question, and this question, and I always welcome questions, but it's always a frustrating question for me, no matter what treatment I'm doing. So the question that I got the most was, so is sting therapy not working for you anymore? Are you still stinging? And my answer to that is going to be very brief. And when you do antibiotic therapy, it also causes similar problems. When you do chemotype therapy, which this is, all of these treatments are using toxins, you're going to see ups and you're going to see downs. So when I had that happen, my first thought was I almost didn't want to share that I was going through struggles, because I didn't want people who were just starting out to see my struggles that might be limited to the 1-year mark, or if you're at 6 months that also happens then, or 1.5 years it can happen. My thought was, if that's the reaction that people have, I'm worried it's going to turn people off to stinging, and that I didn't want to do that. My second reaction though was a different one. And it was one of slight frustration, and I would say of an irritation, because I was in a position where I was in massive pain. And we all know that there's this 1-year mark thing, and so that's kind of the thing to default to, is it's probably a 1-year mark thing. But even if it's not, it could be herxing, it could be improper detoxing. It might be that there's something that I'm not addressing. I don't know, maybe it's environmental exposure to allergens. And I know people don't want to hear this, but Amber talked about, and other people have talked about, mold exposure and metal toxicity and candida, that type of stuff. If you don't address those things in your body, big things like metal toxicity and mold exposure, bee venom therapy will struggle, because it's fighting against things that are so big. As it is, it's got to fight against Lyme and co-infections. So if you add on to that mold and metals and food allergies like wheat gluten and all kinds of stuff, it's just makes it more complicated. So as frustrating as that can get to hear, when we brainstorm, that's what it is. It's brainstorming. It doesn't mean you have mold toxicity. You may not. So anyway, I want to talk about what happened though after so from June, maybe a little prior to June, to now, which is the 21st. And I'm hesitant to say this strongly. I had agonizing pain though. In fact, I even think some of my pain started in May. That's maybe what threw me off, because it was a little shy of the 1-year mark. And now it seems to be dying down. And it happened relatively kind of fast. Now, is that going to for sure stay away? I don't know, it's not fully gone. But, so I mean, when we struggle at certain periods, I think we need to reach out, and then the first question really shouldn't be, you know, is our sting's not working, or it really shouldn't be. Because this is a 2 to 3 year commitment, and honestly, for those of us that have been sick for 20 years or more, it's probably more like a 3-year commitment. And it may even be a life commitment. And what I mean is stinging at some sort of level permanently. And I am going to actually address in a separate video what I think about high stinging and daily stinging, because I have done high stinging. I have not done daily stinging because there's some reasons I don't really like it. I don't think more is better. I think, and I'm going to discuss it in a separate video, it will get too long. So I hope that that's made it clear that I had this really bad situation happen, and now I'm starting to see some kind of tapering off of that, and I'm hoping it will continue to go in that direction. I'm not the first person I've seen that's had this happen. So, you know, to answer most people's questions, you know, just because I have a bad day or a bad week or even a bad month doesn't mean I blame my current therapy. I'm not even just doing bee sting therapy. So a lot of people, and this is why I'm going to share this just in my own group, because some people are purists there, so they're just going to take bee products, they're just going to do bee venom therapy. I've never been that type of person. Anyone who knows about this group knows that I started this group in mind with people who approach different therapies as they need to. And one of the things that saved my life, and it's actually before I did anything, was herbal therapy. It was classical herbal therapy. And actually I'm going to go get it so I can show you. So I took, like, these are classical pearls, and I took different types. Like in the morning I take lightning mixed with cinnamon, and it's not like these are really simplistic formulas. If you look at the back, there's tons of stuff in both of them. And then at night I take the same one, lightning, and I mix it with this, which is called spirit. And these get swapped around about every 6 weeks or so. So that's the first thing I did, and I was really sick. And within about a month of doing that, taking, I think it was flax oil and fish oil, and starting a gluten-free diet, I was able to function enough to at least get into my wheelchair and go up for a trip in Seattle, which we hadn't been out up here in a long while. Even though I was wheelchair bound, I still did a lot better. So, like I said, I can't say enough stuff about, if you're struggling, it's not the same as Buhner's. I know there's a lot of people who use Buhner in these groups, Stephen Buhner's herbs, which is a very disorganized way of using herbs, and it's an American herbalist who's just pounding the hell out of viruses and co-infections. I'm sorry to say this, but I'm going to say what I think about it. He's got a kill mentality. He says he doesn't, but he does, because if you just throw 12 Japanese knotweed capsules at somebody's body, I vomited when I had 2 or 3 of those. It took me a day. It's a kill mentality, and these organisms, you're not going to outsmart them with single-use herbs. I think this probably has about 20 different herbs in it. And the guy who makes these would never use the kind of doses that Buhner uses. I actually did have more success with Cowden's protocol than I did with Buhner, but I know people who haven't. And I would again say that it is more of a kill mentality than is Heiner Fruehauf's philosophy and classical Chinese pearls. Then after I was on that, I used medical marijuana. I used that to detox off opiates. It took me about a year and a month to get off opiates using a special, I call it Rick Simpson's oil, but it's not really Rick Simpson's oil. It's alcohol extracted, cannabis extracted organic alcohol, or high proof alcohol. And so I used that, and I think that was pivotal in at least stopping some symptoms. And then diet was crucial. I had to eliminate so many things. And once, I think it was February 2013, once I was off of opiates, I started taking low-dose naltrexone. For those people that are against pharmaceuticals, you may want to shut the camera off now. I am not opposed to pharmaceuticals. I'm opposed to greedy use of pharmaceuticals and stupid use of pharmaceuticals. But low-dose naltrexone is actually an alternative therapy that was developed, pioneered by I think this is true. He's the only one that I saw when I first got on it. by Dr. Bahiri. You can Google him. I probably will post his discussion about the early use of low-dose naltrexone in addiction, and then subsequently HIV, and then obviously now it's just morphed into being used for autoimmune disorders and even Lyme disease. It's been a great asset for a number of us. So after I took that, I just continued though to struggle with drenching sweats. And I think if you have babesia and if you have sweats during the night and the day, and they're kind of cyclical, and it's sort of hard to tell when you're having, like you're not seeing, it's a pattern, but it's not necessarily, for me it was all the time. If I got in the shower, I sweat. If I went in the kitchen, I sweat. If I went into a store that was marginally humid, I sweat. I mean, it was just something else. Any kind of stress, I sweat. And so everyone thought it was psychiatric. Well, I could be sitting there and be just fine and have sweat pouring off me. I go into saunas now to sweat. So, and that's not something I would have done before. So that went on for 13 years, and I was trying to think where I was going with that. It's often very hard for me to do a video in this house. I can hear just about every bit of talking that goes on in this house. Well, I lost my train of thought. Well, I think where I was going with it is that I had, guys, do you mind going upstairs? I'm trying to do a video. I'm going to have to re-record it if you don't go upstairs. Or just go outside or something. I'm sorry. I'm not irritated. It's just I don't want to record this whole thing. Actually, obviously I am irritated. Why lie? So, I think after struggling with those sweats for 13 years and doing LDN and getting some relief, it just kept going. Like, I was wearing this gigantic coat, and I'll show you it. So, I mean, you can see the weather here based on looking out the window, but it was about 100 plus degrees, and I would go out biking and wear this coat, which is a hand-me-up from my nephew. It looks like I'm in the military in this coat. And I would get on my bike and ride in 80 plus to 100 plus degree weather because I'd have sweat all over me. So it'd stop wind chill. Most people do that on motorcycles, not on a bike where they're going 10 miles an hour. So I started stinging, and this was why I don't stop stinging. For those of you that ask, oh, why when you're in pain do you not stop stinging? Well, because I still don't sweat. That's why. It was that debilitating. It's a symptom that made me darn well not want to live. That's the point I was at. For years. Just that alone. Even when my pain was under control with opiates, just that symptom alone was enough to drive me to distraction. And I can tell, I think it's bad in Africa where the people have a traditional malaria, and babesia is horrendous. It affects your red blood cells. It's similar, but it's not the same. And I think, as Dr. Horowitz has said, and my own doctor, Dr. Heiner Fruhoff, and his associates have stated, when people get multiple pathogenic exposure, it is a lot worse than when they have one thing. And actually, I'm not sure we ever had just one thing. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we determined it was ever just Lyme. Maybe that's just the only one we identified. I certainly believe that, probably now when you get bit by something, it's probably going to spew a lot more crud into you. But I think even back then that might have been the case. We just didn't have the testing to know about it. Or maybe babesia and Bartonella and Erklea and those things have become more common than they were at the time. But I think none of this stuff's easy to fight with. So don't get stuck on one treatment. Myself, I went back to herbs. These are gentle enough to use with bee venom therapy. Try doing that with Buhner's herbs and you may find yourself extremely sick. You better be detoxing well. And some of those herbs, I would not advise taking them the way he says to take them. So if you're going to use Buhner's herbs, you really are going to have to do a lot of extensive research, and you'll probably have to pull in a Chinese herbalist who's going to tell you that it's not the way to approach it, or an American herbalist that's willing to make a great herbal blend that, is kind of, I don't know how to say this, targeted toward all the different problems that you're having, but like say it can attack from different angles, and then you're not going to be able to take that thing continuously. When you take things continuously, your body gets used to it, the organisms get used to it, and they find ways around it, and then you have an unsuccessful treatment. I remember when I was taking these, the doctor asked me, will you be able to switch over to the granule form? It's just these granules that you put into hot water and you swallow them. And I said yes, and he said thank God, because at some point I'm going to run out of formulas on you. So that tells you how much even an herbalist believes that you'll see resistance. And now I'm going to give you my opinion, even though I said I wasn't going to, on stinging daily and stinging at high levels. Stinging daily may very well create the same problem that my herbalist was afraid that he might cause if I took this nonstop. I know people who just took these two for a year. It didn't work. If you're stinging daily, you very well might run into a problem where your body actually knows what you're going to do, and the organisms start getting around it. The other problem I have with stinging daily is it does not give your adrenals a chance to catch up and rest. A lot of us are very sick. And I can feel adrenaline rushes and adrenaline kick in just from gathering bees. And I'm not really afraid of them. Just from getting them prepped for stinging. And I don't ice. So it's not that I'm really that afraid, but I mean it causes adrenaline rushes, and it causes your body to need to produce cortisol. So I'd be careful about daily stinging. High stinging. I did that during winter. I was willing to sting 20 and even 20 plus at times. Stinging daily a whole bunch doesn't necessarily mean better. It's just probably better to pick out good acupuncture points, use Amber's book, or, and use the net and pick those out. You'll probably do better with that. And 6 or 7 along the spine. You can go to 12 to 14. I don't really see much benefit above that. Summer bees are very, very punchy. So I'm giving that opinion. That's I had to bring mine. I think I was up at, I was scared to come down. I was like at, 18 stings or something. And I was afraid to come down because I was afraid, oh God, I'm going to start getting sick again. Well, finally I just went, it's too much. Even if I do get sick, I'm going to come down. So I came down to like 14. I was like, that's still too much. And I came down to 12, and then I was going to come down more, and I actually found that 12 seems to be okay. But I would absolutely keep it at 10 or lower if I had to. I think, there's a lot of people that think more stings or more toxin is more treatment, and I do not think that's accurate. So there you are. Sorry for the long video, but it is necessary to talk, and you can stop and start videos. You don't have to watch the whole thing. But anyone getting frustrated with me over talking about pharmaceuticals or other treatments, I'm not sure what to say, because Lyme disease is and I say Lyme disease, and I really want to say vector-borne disease. Like diseases that are transmitted by arachnids, and maybe it's looking like insects or through sexual transmission or whatever, in utero. These are very tricky illnesses. And so, you need to be thinking about it. Somebody mentioned stevia. There's a whole lot of people saying stevia didn't work. It's been studied, and it does look like it works against persistent forms of certain cells that antibiotics can't get to. So it may be a thing to think about doing. If you do it, Nutrametic sells a stevia that I'd use, or something like it. Those studies seem to suggest that it needed to be a liquid, like extracted stevia. And so anyway, that's it. I'm going to stop right there. Bye-bye. Sorry if I had too much grumpiness in here. It's stuff that happens to me, and I think it's best just to leave it. Bye-bye.